At my sister's wedding, she pulled me aside and said, "The venue wants another $7,000. Can you handle it?" I paid without question. During the reception, I overheard her tell her friends, "My brother's so desperate to feel important that he'll pay for anything." I quietly walked to the DJ, handed him $250, and said, "Play this announcement." The entire wedding heard. The bride would like to thank her brother for the $7,000 charity donation that made tonight possible. I, 32M, always knew my sister had a way with words, but I never thought she'd use them to slice me open at her own wedding. The day started like any other family celebration, chaos wrapped in expensive decorations. I'd driven 3 hours to get to the venue, a sprawling estate that probably cost more than most people's cars. My sister had always dreamed big, and apparently, her wedding was no exception. Everything seemed perfect until about an hour before the ceremony. I was adjusting my tie in the men's room when she appeared beside me, looking stunning in her dress but with panic written across her face. She grabbed my arm and told me the venue manager had just approached her with devastating news. There was an issue with the payment. Apparently, the final balance was higher than expected. The venue wanted another $7,000 immediately, or they'd have to cancel key services. The flowers, the upgraded dinner service, even the photographer's extended hours were all on the line. My heart sank watching her face crumble. This was supposed to be her perfect day, and here was this massive problem threatening to destroy everything. She asked if I could possibly help cover it, promising to pay me back as soon as they returned from their honeymoon. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my phone and handled the payment transfer right there in the hallway. $7,000, nearly my entire savings, gone in 30 seconds. But seeing the relief wash over her face made it worth every penny. She hugged me tight and told me I was the best brother in the world. The ceremony was beautiful. She looked radiant walking down the aisle, and I felt proud knowing I'd helped preserve her special day. During the cocktail hour, I mingled with family and friends, accepting compliments on how wonderful everything looked. That's when I overheard it. I was walking past a group of her college friends near the bar when I caught my sister's voice rising above their laughter. She was telling them about the last-minute venue crisis and how she'd handled it. But her version was different from what I remembered. She told her friends that her brother was so desperate to feel important and needed in the family that he'd pay for anything if asked nicely. She laughed about how easy it was to get the money from me, describing me as someone who throws cash around just to feel relevant. The group erupted in laughter, and someone mentioned how pathetic that sounded. I stood frozen behind a pillar, my blood turning to ice. The woman I'd just helped, the sister I'd sacrificed my savings for, was mocking me to her friends like I was some kind of joke. But then I heard something that made my stomach drop completely. One of her friends asked why she didn't just ask her parents for the money instead. My sister's response changed everything. She told them the venue crisis was real, but she'd actually already figured out another solution before asking me. Her new husband's uncle had offered to cover the extra costs as a wedding gift. She'd taken my money anyway because, as she put it, free money from a desperate brother was better than owing a favor to an in-law. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only had she mocked me behind my back, but she'd manipulated me into paying for something that was already handled. I'd been played completely, and she was bragging about it. I walked away from that conversation with my hands shaking and my mind racing. The reception was in full swing, with couples dancing and guests celebrating, but all I could think about was how to respond to what I'd just learned. I spent the next hour watching her work the room, accepting congratulations and playing the perfect bride. Every smile she flashed felt like another knife twist. When she caught my eye across the dance floor and waved cheerfully, I nearly lost it completely. That's when I remembered something about the DJ setup. I'd noticed earlier that he had a wireless microphone system with multiple channels. More importantly, I'd overheard him telling the wedding coordinator that he could make announcements from anywhere in the venue using the portable transmitter. I found him during a quiet moment between songs and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. $250 cash to make a special announcement for the bride. I told him it was a surprise tribute that the family had planned, and I'd handle writing the message. He looked confused but pocketed the money quickly. I handed him a piece of paper with the exact wording I wanted, and he agreed to read it during the next break in dancing. 10 minutes later, the music faded and the DJ's voice boomed across the reception hall. He announced that the bride had asked him to share a special message of gratitude with all her guests. The room quieted as everyone turned their attention to the speakers. Then came the words that would change everything. He announced that the bride wanted to personally thank her brother for his generous $7,000 charity donation that had made the evening's festivities possible. He added that she was overwhelmed by such selfless generosity and wanted everyone to know how grateful the family was for this incredible gift. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched from across the room as my sister's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, realization, then pure horror. Her friends looked between her and me with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment. The entire wedding party had heard the announcement, along with both sets of parents and every single guest. Her new husband grabbed her arm and asked what the announcement meant. Family members started approaching me with congratulations and questions about my generous donation. My parents looked confused but proud, asking when I decided to make such a significant contribution to the wedding. But the best part was watching my sister's college friends. The same group that had been laughing about my desperation to feel important now stared at her with obvious discomfort. They'd been caught in the middle of her deception, and everyone could see it. She tried to approach me through the crowd, but I was surrounded by relatives and family friends wanting to shake my hand and praise my generosity. Every person who congratulated me was another reminder to her of how badly she'd miscalculated. The wedding coordinator approached me with paperwork, asking if I needed documentation for tax purposes regarding my charitable contribution. I played along perfectly, thanking her for being so thorough and mentioning how important it was to keep proper records of such donations. My sister finally managed to pull me aside near the kitchen entrance. Her face was flushed, and she demanded to know what I thought I was doing. She told me the announcement had embarrassed her in front of everyone and that I was ruining her wedding day. I told her I was simply ensuring everyone knew about my generous charity donation, just like she'd wanted. After all, hadn't she just been telling her friends how much she appreciated my financial contribution? I mentioned that I thought it was only fair that all the guests knew about the donation that had made their wonderful evening possible. She realized then that I'd overheard her conversation with her friends. The color drained from her face as she understood that I knew about both the mockery and the deception about the venue crisis. She tried to backtrack, claiming she'd been joking with her friends and that I'd misunderstood the situation. She insisted the money was still needed and that she'd never meant to hurt me. I told her that since she'd already described my payment as a charity donation to her friends, I was happy to make it official. As far as I was concerned, she'd received a $7,000 wedding gift from her brother, and now everyone knew about it. The rest of the reception was uncomfortable for everyone involved. Guests kept approaching both of us with questions about the donation. Some family members started asking why additional money had been needed and whether there had been problems with the wedding planning. Her new husband pulled me aside and asked directly what was going on. I told him he should probably discuss the evening's events with his new wife, as there seemed to be some confusion about the financial arrangements. My parents eventually cornered me and demanded an explanation. I told them that my sister had approached me with a venue emergency requiring immediate payment, and I'd been happy to help ensure her wedding day went smoothly. I mentioned that I'd later learned the situation was more complicated than initially presented, but that I considered the money a wedding gift regardless. The drive home that night was surreal. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from family members asking for more details about what had happened. Some praised my generosity, while others seemed to sense there was more to the story. Update 1. The fallout began almost immediately. By the next morning, my phone was ringing nonstop with calls from various family members who'd started putting together the pieces of what had really happened at the reception. My aunt called first, having overheard several conversations between wedding guests about the strange announcement and the tension between my sister and me afterward. She asked directly if there had been some kind of family drama, noting that the whole situation felt off. Then my cousin called. She'd been friends with some of my sister's college group and had heard whispers about a conversation that had gone badly wrong. She wanted to know if I was okay and whether there was anything I needed to talk about. But the most difficult call came from my parents. They'd spent the night discussing the events and had realized something was seriously wrong. They asked me to come over and explain exactly what had happened, making it clear they expected the complete truth. I drove to their house that afternoon, dreading the conversation but knowing it was inevitable. They sat me down in the living room and asked me to start from the beginning. I told them everything: the venue crisis, the immediate payment, overhearing my sister mock me to her friends, learning about the deception regarding the uncle's offer, and my decision to make the announcement. I watched their faces change as they processed each detail. My mother's reaction was the worst. She looked devastated, asking how her daughter could have treated me so cruelly. She kept shaking her head and muttering about how disappointed she was in my sister's behavior. My father was angry. He wanted to call my sister immediately and demand an explanation. He talked about how wrong it was to manipulate family and how the mockery made everything 10 times worse. I asked them not to get involved directly, explaining that I'd handled the situation in my own way and that pursuing it further would only create more family drama. But I could tell they were struggling with their disappointment in my sister's actions. Meanwhile, my sister had apparently spent the day fielding her own difficult conversations. Her new husband had started asking serious questions about the financial deception, wanting to understand how she could have taken money that wasn't needed and then mocked the person who provided it. Several wedding guests had called her asking about the charity donation announcement, clearly sensing that something hadn't been right about the whole situation. Some had even asked whether they should adjust their own wedding gifts based on the financial contribution I'd apparently made. Her college friends were reportedly feeling terrible about their role in the mockery, having been caught laughing about someone's generosity in front of the entire extended family. Word was spreading through their social circle about what had happened, and it wasn't reflecting well on anyone involved. Update 2. 3 days after the wedding, my sister finally called me directly. Her voice was different, smaller somehow, lacking the confident tone she'd always used with me. She told me she'd been thinking about everything that had happened and that she wanted to apologize. But even her apology felt calculated, focusing more on how the situation had gotten out of hand rather than acknowledging the fundamental cruelty of what she'd done. She explained that the comment to her friends had been taken out of context, claiming she'd been trying to sound sophisticated and worldly in front of them. She insisted she'd never meant for me to overhear it, and that the whole thing was just a terrible misunderstanding. When I pressed her about the deception regarding the venue payment, her story started falling apart. She admitted that her husband's uncle had indeed offered to help, but claimed she'd forgotten about that offer when she approached me. She said she'd been so stressed about the wedding that she hadn't been thinking clearly. I told her I didn't believe her explanation. The mockery had been too detailed and too cruel to be a simple misunderstanding. The deception about the payment was too convenient to be forgotten stress. She'd manipulated me deliberately, and we both knew it. She started crying then, telling me how the announcement had humiliated her in front of everyone she cared about. She said her new husband was questioning her character, and that several friendships had been damaged by the whole situation. I told her that she'd created this mess herself by treating me like a fool and that the consequences were entirely of her own making. The announcement had simply revealed the truth about what had happened, and if that truth was embarrassing, then perhaps she should have considered that before mocking me to her friends. She asked what it would take for me to help fix the situation. She wanted me to call family members and explain that the announcement had been a joke that went too far. She suggested we could tell people that the money had been a legitimate expense and that everything was fine between us. I told her I wouldn't help her lie to our family any more than she'd already done. The $7,000 was gone, and as far as I was concerned, it had been a very expensive lesson for both of us. The conversation ended with her becoming angry, telling me I was being vindictive and that I was destroying her marriage over a simple mistake. She accused me of being jealous of her happiness and of deliberately trying to ruin her new relationship. That evening, my mother called to tell me that my sister had contacted her, begging for help in smoothing things over with the family. My mother had apparently told her that she needed to take responsibility for her actions and make genuine amends rather than asking others to clean up her mess. My father had been even more direct. He'd told my sister that he was ashamed of how she'd treated me and that she needed to figure out how to earn back the family's trust and respect. Update 3. 2 weeks after the wedding, the full extent of the damage became clear. My sister's marriage was in serious trouble, with her new husband questioning not just this incident, but other aspects of her character and their relationship. He'd apparently done some investigating of his own and discovered that the venue payment issue was completely fabricated. The final balance had been paid weeks earlier, and there had never been any crisis or additional charges. The entire story had been a lie designed to manipulate money from me. When confronted with this evidence, my sister finally admitted the full truth. She'd wanted extra cash for their honeymoon and had seen an opportunity to get it from someone she viewed as an easy target. The mockery to her friends hadn't been a misstatement. It had been her genuine feelings about me and our relationship. Her husband was devastated. He told our parents that he felt like he'd married someone he didn't really know, and that the casual cruelty she'd shown toward her own family made him question everything about their relationship. The college friends who'd been part of the mocking conversation were also dealing with fallout. Word had spread through their social circle about what had happened, and several people had cut ties with the group entirely. Being associated with someone who would mock a family member's generosity had apparently damaged their reputations significantly. My sister made one final attempt to contact me, this time through a long email that arrived at 3 a.m. In it, she laid out a detailed plan for how we could fix everything. She wanted to repay the money, make a public apology, and do whatever it took to restore her reputation and save her marriage. But her email revealed that she still didn't understand the real problem. She was focused entirely on the consequences she was facing, not on the fundamental cruelty and deception she'd engaged in. Her apology was conditional on me helping her repair the damage, and her proposed solutions were all about managing appearances rather than genuine remorse. I didn't respond to the email. 6 months later, I heard through family that her marriage had ended. Her husband had apparently never been able to get past the deception and manipulation, and their relationship had deteriorated steadily after the wedding. My sister had moved back in with our parents temporarily and was trying to rebuild her life. She'd lost several friendships and was reportedly struggling with the social consequences of her actions. As for me, the $7,000 was gone, but I'd learned something valuable about family, respect, and the price of treating people as disposable. The money had bought me clarity about who my sister really was, and in some ways, that knowledge was worth every penny. I never got an apology that felt genuine, and I never got my money back. But I also never had to wonder again whether my sister saw me as family or as a convenient source of funding. The wedding announcement had answered that question permanently. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are also the most valuable ones.